never thought letting my daughter move back home would end in a man half drunk in my living room, calling me a burden. It happened on a Thursday evening, cold outside, but the tension inside was hotter than hell. Derek, my son-in-law, was lounging on my sofa like it was his throne, whiskey glass in hand. He didn't even look at me when he said it. "Old woman, your savings and pension are ours. You should be grateful we're keeping you around." Just like that. No warning, no hesitation. He said it like it was fact. Melissa, my only child, sat next to him. She didn't blink, didn't flinch. Her fingers tapped the armrest, neat little taps like she was keeping time with her heartbeat. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That hurt more than anything Derek said. She'd always been good at pretending not to see what was uncomfortable. I didn't shout, didn't cry. I just smiled. "Is that so?" I said quietly. "Then I suppose congratulations are in order." Derek raised his glass, thinking I was being ironic. Melissa shifted in her seat, like she suddenly remembered I was still a person in the room. But I'd already stood up and walked out to the kitchen. They went back to their laughter, toasting themselves with liquor I paid for, under a roof I paid off. In the kitchen, I stood over the sink, hands gripping the counter until my knuckles turned white. My husband's photo watched me from the corner shelf. I used to joke he haunted the living room. Now I wished he would. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw them out that second. But that's not how women like me are raised. We're raised to let things settle. Be gracious, be patient. But in that moment, I stopped being patient. I didn't have a plan yet, but I knew this. Nobody calls me a burden in my own home and walks away richer for it. Tomorrow, they'd still be laughing, but they wouldn't see the shift. Tomorrow, I'd begin. 2 weeks earlier, the house smelled like cheap takeout and a bruise of silence. Did I miss the sign? Melissa stood at the sink, head bowed like a child, bracing for punishment. She twisted her wedding ring like it hurt. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mom," she'd said, eyes glistening. Derek's company cut his roll. You know how these startups are. I nodded. I didn't ask why she wore a Michael Kors coat if they were struggling. I didn't ask why her nails were fresh or how they could afford Thai delivery 3 nights in a row. I just said yes. Of course I said yes. The house had been so quiet since Richard passed 5 years ago. Sometimes I'd catch myself speaking aloud to no one, just to hear another voice, so I let them in. At first, I told myself it was temporary, a few weeks of noise, of company, family, but the laughter I'd imagined never came. Instead, I heard boots, Derek's, thudding down the hallway like he owned it. Heard Melissa whisper argue in corners, never loud enough for full sentences, just fragments. "I told you not yet. She's not stupid. Do you want her to catch on?" Catch on to what? I made dinner the first night, a roast chicken with rosemary and garlic. Melissa barely touched hers. Derek brought a beer to the table. No thanks, no eye contact. Just shoved his plate back when he was done. "House could use updates," he said, wiping his mouth with a paper towel. "That old carpet's depressing." He was looking at the rug Richard and I bought in Santa Fe, the one we laid out together after his second surgery, laughing about how it didn't match a damn thing but made us feel like we'd done something brave. I looked at Derek and saw it. Entitlement dressed as casual opinion. Ownership testing its boundaries. Melissa didn't correct him. She stared at her plate. The next morning, I found his sneakers by the front door. My guest room, the blue one I'd set up for them, was empty. They'd moved into the master, my bed, my sheets. They didn't ask, they just did. It started with Derek insisting on paying a few bills. "We're family," he said, casually reaching for my electric statement like it belonged to him. "Let us pitch in." I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. After all, wasn't that what Richard and I raised Melissa to do? Be generous, be kind. I told myself this was marriage, that her husband was just trying to help. But little things kept going missing. Not stolen, just absorbed. My grocery card, the one I used at the pharmacy and the co-op, stopped working. Melissa blamed it on bank errors. Then Derek suggested we streamline things by merging our checking accounts. "It'll be easier," he said. "You're always forgetting passwords." I wasn't. Then one afternoon, I came back from my weekly book club and saw it. A brand new curved gaming monitor set up in the den. Derek lounging in front of it like a king. When I asked how they'd paid for it, he didn't even pretend to lie. "Your pension card still works, right?" he said, chuckling. "Relax. It's all family money now." Family money. That was the moment. The instant everything inside me shifted. I'd heard that tone before. At the credit union, back when I used to sit across from slick men in expensive jackets trying to rewrite financial rules to suit their convenience. The charm, the arrogance, the assumption that I wouldn't understand the fine print. What Derek didn't know was that I'd spent 32 years as a compliance officer. I've reported fraud, flagged elder abuse cases, and sat through more legal trainings than he's read emails. I know the difference between joint ownership and authorized access. I know how power of attorney works. I know what banks log, what metadata holds, what counts in court, and I sure as hell know what a forged signature looks like. They thought they were clever. They mistook politeness for confusion, silence for surrender. They were stealing from someone who helped draft the very consumer fraud policies they were about to violate. So I smiled. I went quiet. I started taking longer walks. Let them think I was fragile, that I'd just given up. They were counting on my inaction. But what they never saw, what they still didn't see, even when Derek had the nerve to wink at me across my own dinner table, was that I was already 5 steps ahead. The first person I called was Helen Nond, retired attorney, widow, loyal friend of 30 years, and still sharper than a thumbtack left point up on a church pew. She picked up on the second ring. "Dorothy?" she said. "What's wrong?" I didn't bother with small talk. I think Derek's testing how far he can push before it becomes a felony. Silence. Then, calm and measured. Then, "It's time to push back. Come tomorrow. Bring everything." I slept better that night than I had in weeks. The next morning, I drove out to Helen's house in Westfield. She was already at the kitchen table, legal pads spread out, reading glasses perched on her nose. There was coffee waiting, and one of those ugly but delicious pastries she knows I like. I handed her my notes, timelines, card charges, account changes I hadn't authorized. I showed her the printout of the gaming system Derek had bought using my account. I told her about the shared checking he pushed for, the bed they'd taken without asking, the cold roast chicken, and Melissa's silence. Helen didn't interrupt. She just took notes, flipping pages like she already saw where this was going. "I want them out," I said, "but I want it clean, legal, no tantrums, no screaming, just final." She looked up then, her voice calm, her eyes full of fire. "Then we start with 3 things. Secure your finances, prove misconduct, file for emergency removal on grounds of financial exploitation. We'll use civil codes, not drama." I nodded. "And Melissa?" Helen was quiet a moment. "Melissa's choosing not to see it. But when it hits the court, she won't be able to ignore it." It hurt. God, it hurt to say nothing in my daughter's defense, but silence had cost me enough already. "Good," I said. "Let's begin." By noon, Helen had written a checklist of what I'd need. Account records, any evidence of unauthorized use, timestamps, signatures. She gave me a USB drive encrypted with a passphrase only I knew. "This is yours," she said. "No cloud storage, no trust." I slipped it into my purse and sat back. "I think he believes I'll die before I do anything," I said softly. Helen didn't smile. "Then it's time to show him how much fight you've got left. Clean, legal, final." And the first crack in their little scheme? He left it right there in my banking portal. He left the first breadcrumb himself. Derek had just come back from meeting a guy about refinancing options. He said it casually, like he was talking about car tires or lunch specials. "We'll leverage the equity," he announced. "Maybe pull out enough to remodel the bathroom. If we're smart about it, we can fold your accounts into the process and avoid taxes." Your accounts. He always said "we" when it was something he wanted, and "you" when it was something he blamed. While he rambled about shared assets and streamlining retirement, I slipped into my bedroom, shut the door, and opened my laptop. I'd been quiet for weeks, playing dumb, letting them think I was slipping, but that portal hadn't forgotten who owned the login. It was all right there. Derek had added himself as a joint holder on both my checking and the pension-linked savings account. not authorized user, not emergency contact. Joint, which meant, in the bank's system, he could withdraw, transfer, or close the accounts with zero warning. I clicked into the account, change history. Every action logged, timestamp, IP address, authorization path. I scanned the page until something caught my breath in my throat. The authorization had come in on March 19th at 2:44 p.m., but I hadn't been in town. I had the boarding pass to prove it. I was in Arizona that entire week visiting Nora, my sister-in-law. I was eating dry chicken salad in a hospital cafeteria, while Derek was, apparently, impersonating me from hundreds of miles away. He'd counted on me not checking, or forgetting, or not knowing how to find the log history at all. Mistake. I took a screenshot, then another, downloaded the full log as a PDF. The portal generated a digital audit trail with his name, location, and device data. He thought he'd slipped in unnoticed, but now I had proof, digital, time-stamped, and backed by a bank's own compliance system. It was just one breadcrumb, one forged trail of consent, but it was all I needed to start pulling the whole rotten thread. I knew what came next. The forgery. It's always the same with men like Derek. They think forging a name is just copying letters, but a signature isn't handwriting. It's a rhythm, a motion your hand remembers even when your mind forgets. It's muscle memory, not ink, and mine had never curled that way. I logged into my bank's online help center, selected suspicious account modification, and submitted a request for the original signature file on the joint account form. They didn't even call to verify. 62 minutes later, the PDF arrived in my inbox, auto-generated, time-stamped, attached like a receipt. I opened it slowly, like peeling back the seal on something sacred. And there it was, my name, in Derek's hand, not mine. He'd tried to mimic the loops, but the D was too round. My D always dips sharp, like a fishhook. And the T in Parker? I never cross it high. His sat like a rooftop over the whole word. It was a child's idea of a forgery. But to a bank clerk, it looked just close enough to pass. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I doubted what it meant, but because I realized he hadn't even tried that hard. That's what stayed with me. He didn't think I'd ever see it. Or worse, he thought I'd see it and do nothing. I printed 2 copies, one for myself, one for Helen. Then, I transferred both digital files to the encrypted USB, labeled it inheritance fraud, initial. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and opened Richard's old file box. I pulled out my marriage license, my notarized pension documents, the deed to the house, every paper with my real signature. For comparison. For court. I wasn't going to scream or bang on walls. I wasn't going to confront him with the page in my hand. Not yet. Because the more quiet I was, the more reckless he'd get. And I wanted everything recorded before I made a single move. Let him feel safe. Let him hang himself in comfort. The shift came casually, like all the worst ones do. We were sitting in the den. Derek had just finished off the last beer from my fridge and was thumbing through Zillow like a man browsing luxury catalogs. "We'll sell in spring," he said, not even looking up. "Get ahead of the summer market. Smart timing." I blinked. "Sell what?" He gave me that smirk, the one he thought was charming but always felt like a dare. "The house. It's got good bones, but it's outdated. We'll list, get top dollar, and downsize into something newer. Maybe move out to Lakewood, closer to Melissa's work. We list, downsize." Melissa sat on the arm of the sofa, fingers grazing his shoulder like he was a goddamn hero. "It's for the best, Mom," she murmured. "You don't need all this space. We can manage the proceeds and make sure you're comfortable." There it was. We can manage, like I was an asset, like I was a problem to be solved, like I wasn't sitting 6 feet away, listening to my only child discuss divesting me of my home like I was already in the ground. I nodded slowly. "Lakewood's nice." Derek lit up. He thought I was agreeing. They always do when you play small. He kept talking. Plus, the equity will pad out your retirement. And since the accounts are already consolidated, we can shift everything into something safer. Maybe a joint annuity. I nearly laughed. They were building castles on sand, and they thought it was marble. That night, I updated the folder on my USB, labeled it Intent to Liquidate Property, Verbal Admission, because I remembered every word. And I recorded it all, not on purpose. But my smart speaker caught more than weather forecasts and dinner playlists. He'd given me the key phrase himself last week. Alexa, add eggs to the grocery list. He'd said it right in the middle of a rant about replacing the kitchen cabinets. And now the cloud file held 30 minutes of their plans. Clear voices, clear intent. I downloaded the audio. I backed it up 3 times. They were building their future on stolen ground. And when it all fell through, they'd have no idea how early the collapse began. I was rinsing out a teacup when I heard him say it. Yeah, she thinks they're still locked in. I moved the money last Thursday. I didn't say a word. I just turned the faucet off and walked to my room. Sat on the edge of the bed I no longer slept in because they'd claimed the master. I didn't even cry. I just felt hollow. Like something was scraping out my insides with a spoon. I opened my banking app. There it was. A pending consolidation transfer, marked processed. Gone. All of it. And that was when the fear finally crept in. Not because of the money. No, not that. I could earn money. I had backup accounts, investments they didn't know about. It was the ease of it. How easily they'd reached into my life and pulled pieces out. Like my legacy was a drawer they could rummage through when they felt like shopping. And Melissa? She walked in 20 minutes later with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses, for her and Derek. Don't wait up, Mom, she said without looking at me. We've had a long week, I nodded. And that night, as I lay awake listening to their footsteps above me, the betrayal settled into something colder. Not grief, not hurt, strategy. Because now it wasn't about the accounts, or the pension, or even the house. It was about what they'd done with my trust, and how quiet I'd been while they did it. Helen called just after noon. Can you come over? Today? She didn't ask if I was busy. She didn't tell me what it was about. She didn't have to. I brought coffee like I always did. She didn't touch hers. I went through the pension portal, she said, pulling out a folder. I wasn't expecting this. The folder was thick, but she didn't hand it to me. She opened it herself, laid it out like a priest preparing last rites. Dorothy, she said. Derek filed caregiver documents. I blinked. What? He filed a claim that he is your full-time caregiver, that you're no longer capable of managing your financial or medical decisions. He submitted letters, signed affidavits, notarized forms. I stared at her. But she nodded. They're forged. It didn't land at first. It just floated in the air between us, like the smell of bad news. He claimed you have dementia. The room spun. Not quickly, not like panic, more like slow betrayal, dripping down the walls, soaking into the floorboards. I felt dirty, like my life had been opened up and rewritten while I was still living it. Helen turned the page. And here's the worst part. He updated your pension beneficiary. If something happens to you, stroke, fall, car crash, everything goes to him, not to Melissa, not to my grandchildren, not to a trust, to him. A man I didn't even like sitting next to. My hands were shaking, but I kept them folded. Melissa knew. I said it out loud, and once I did, I couldn't stop. She watched him take over the accounts. She watched him move into my bed, my kitchen. She heard him say, "We'll sell the house." And she didn't say a word, because she knew, because she thought that it was love, Helen said gently, not theft. It took me a moment to realize I was crying. Not loud, not ugly, just the quiet kind. The kind that leaves salt tracks down your face while you keep breathing like nothing's wrong. Helen reached for my hand. "We're not done," I said. "I'm not leaving anything to chance." She squeezed it once. I know. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in Richard's old chair, the one with the worn armrests and the small rip he never bothered to fix. It still smelled faintly of aftershave and old leather. 5 years, and I still hadn't moved it. I used to think that was grief. Now I understood it was anchor, a reminder that something real had once existed here. The photo of us from our trip to Mendocino sat on the bookshelf. Richard with his wind-blown hair, me in a coat 3 sizes too big. We looked like kids. We'd been married 29 years by then. "I hear you now," I whispered to him. He used to say patience was strength, that people revealed themselves if you waited long enough. But now I saw what patience really was. It's what predators count on. It's the stillness they move through, the lull that makes them think you're harmless. I'd waited long enough. I'd given Melissa space to wake up, to see who she'd married, to remember who raised her. But she wasn't waking up. She'd curled into comfort, let it hold her like a warm lie. And that meant the part of me that still wanted to protect her. That part had to go silent. That's the cost. Letting go of the daughter I raised so I could defend the woman I still am. I got up around 3 a.m. and opened the locked drawer in my desk, the one that held my power of attorney files, my will, my contingency forms. I reread every word. Then I took out the blank set I'd printed the night before and filled out new ones. Melissa was no longer listed. I replaced her name with Helen's, gave her full, durable authority. Health, legal, financial. The page felt heavier when I signed it, not just because of the ink, because I knew what it meant, that whatever happened next, whether this turned into a courtroom or a family war, I wasn't flinching, I wasn't begging, and I wasn't going back. When I finished, I sat back down in Richard's chair, hands folded. The sun hadn't risen yet, but I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, not quite, just readiness. I made roast again. Just like the first week they moved in, same dish, same table, same silence. But this time I set the table for 3. No more dinners in the den, no plates on laps. I brought out the good napkins, the ones from our anniversary set. Melissa looked surprised. Derek raised an eyebrow, already halfway through his first beer. "What's the occasion?" I smiled. "I've just been thinking about how lucky I am to have you two here. Really. It's taken so much off my plate." He grinned. That smug, heavy kind of grin men wear when they think you've finally come around. Melissa's shoulders relaxed. She even touched my hand as I passed the potatoes. I almost pulled away, but I didn't. Let her believe we were back to normal. Then, halfway through the meal, I raised my glass. "To Derek," I said sweetly, "the man who freed me from paperwork and worry." He snorted. "Damn right." Melissa gave a soft little laugh. "That's so sweet, Mom." "I mean it," I continued. "All this time, I thought I had to keep up with bills and banks and codes. But now, I don't have to worry about a thing." He lifted his glass like he was accepting a trophy. "Finally, we're running things efficiently." I tilted my head. "And to think I spent all those years chasing signatures and forms. It's nice to know I can just trust the system." Melissa looked a little uncertain then. Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Derek didn't notice. He was riding too high. After dinner, I cleared the plates. Let them watch TV. Let them believe they'd won. Then I went to my study and closed the door. From 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., the house was still. They were upstairs, probably asleep in the bed Richard built with his own hands. I sat downstairs under a pool of warm lamplight, calm as a monk and twice as focused. First, I moved every last cent out of the accounts Derek had touched. Checking, savings, even the grocery fund Melissa used to split with me. All of it went into a private trust I'd created 5 years ago, quietly and alone. Helen helped me name it. Sparrow Trust. Small, quiet, and impossible to catch if you didn't know where it nested. Next, I opened the account management page and canceled every card linked to the joint accounts. Then I logged out. Permanently. I didn't just remove Derek as a user. I revoked all online access, changed the phone number, the security questions, and the email backups, all to new credentials they've never seen. Next, I attached the PDF forgery of my signature to the email chain I'd started with the bank's internal fraud division. I labeled it Unauthorized account modification, elder abuse report. Underneath it, I wrote, signature file shows forged, authorization. I was in Arizona on this date. Passport stamp and airline confirmation attached. Please confirm receipt. Then I hit send. Finally, I opened the notarized eviction order. It was already signed, witnessed, filed, and waiting. Helen had stamped it with her own hands that morning, while we drank coffee like two women planning a wedding, not a legal war. I uploaded it to the county's overnight system, expedited processing, under elder financial harm. I included the statutes Helen cited. Filed it at 1:47 a.m. When I shut my laptop, I sat back and looked around the room. Same walls, same photos, same curtains I'd sewn when Melissa was in high school. But everything had changed. This wasn't just my house again. This was my arena, and they were sleeping in the middle of it, thinking the match hadn't started. At 8:03 a.m., Derek's debit card declined at the gas station. At 8:11, he tried again. Grocery store this time. Another decline. Melissa came outside barefoot, holding her phone like a shield. I couldn't hear their words, but I didn't need to. Her face said enough. Pale, lips pressed into the same flat line I remember from her teen years, when lies were about report cards, not felony fraud. At 9 o'clock sharp, the knock came. 3 firm raps. Nothing dramatic, just official. I opened the door like I'd been expecting company. Because I had. Mrs. Parker? The sheriff's deputy, clean-cut and polite, held a clipboard and a folded set of documents. This is the court-ordered eviction you filed. We're here to serve it. I nodded and stepped aside. They're out back. He paused, studying me for a second, probably wondering how someone like me had managed to pull off a legal coup before breakfast. They have 10 minutes to gather essentials, he said gently. After that, they'll need to arrange formal re-entry with your written consent. Understood. When Derek came storming through the sliding door, red-faced and loud, the deputy stepped between us before a single word left his mouth. Sir, he said firmly, this is no longer your residence. Melissa froze. Her eyes snapped to me, full of something that looked like realization, but not regret. Just the slow horror of knowing you've backed the wrong horse. I don't understand, Derek snapped. This is her house, ours. She can't. She can, the deputy interrupted. And she did. The court found preliminary evidence of financial misconduct. You've been served. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, hands folded in front of me, the same way my mother used to when company overstayed. He looked at me then, really looked. And for the first time since he walked through my front door, I saw it. Fear, not of me, but of what I knew and what I'd already done. By 11 a.m., they were gone. 3 garbage bags of clothes, a tote of electronics. Derek slammed the trunk like it could undo the paperwork. Melissa didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look back. I closed the door behind them and locked it, top bolt first. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just stood there in the middle of the entryway and breathed like the walls were finally expanding again, like my house was exhaling after months of being held hostage. It was quiet, the real kind of quiet, not silence with tension behind it, just peace. But the world outside? That wasn't quiet at all. Word spreads fast in a small town, faster when the people involved think they're untouchable. By early afternoon, I couldn't buy stamps without someone giving me a look. At the post office, Mary Nichols gave me a slow nod. Good for you, Dorothy, she murmured. About time somebody stopped pretending. I hadn't realized I was pretending. But she was right. At the pharmacy, the clerk smiled and rang me up without comment. But when I reached into my purse, she leaned in. My uncle's going through the same thing, she whispered. If you ever talk to a group about this stuff, let me know. People need to hear it. And at the hardware store, the hardware store. That's where it landed. Derek used to strut in there every other Saturday, barking about tools and siding and, my house needs better airflow. Now his name hung in the air like a bad smell. 2 contractors leaned near the paint aisle, not even pretending to whisper. Did you hear? Stole from his mother-in-law, got served. From inside the house. Damn. By sunset, I got the call. Mrs. Parker? A woman from Derek's old firm. Soft voice, tight tone. We're informing you that, due to recent ethics complaints, Derek is no longer with the company. She paused, like she wasn't sure how much I already knew. I let her sit in that pause. Thank you for the call, I said finally. I hope you review your hiring process. Click. Just like that. The man who thought he owned my life was out of a house, out of a job, and though he didn't know it yet, out of time. Because this wasn't over. Consequences had only just started. The court didn't hesitate. The judge didn't waste time with pleasantries or lectures. She read the documents, listened to the recordings, studied the signatures, and made her ruling with a gavel tap that felt like thunder in my chest. The eviction stood. So did the emergency financial protection order. Then came the part that twisted the knife back into Derek's hands. Full restraining protection. He couldn't call, couldn't text, couldn't come within 200 feet of my home, my bank, or my person. Any violation would put him in a jail cell faster than he could say, "But I'm family." The bailiff handed me a certified copy like it was a diploma. I left the courtroom without looking back. Later that week, the pension board finalized their internal investigation. I received a formal letter. Derek Parker permanently removed as beneficiary and account contact. Immediate freeze lifted. Full control restored. It felt like air after drowning. And Melissa? She never fought it. Didn't file a counterclaim. Didn't even ask for mediation. I think she knew. The silence was her answer. And her punishment. But the one that scared them most? Helen's legal clinic filed everything. Every forged document, every misused signature, every false affidavit, with the state's elder abuse task force. Those weren't just civil violations. They were criminal, fraud, coercion, forgery under false medical claims. You could practically smell the panic coming off Derek's skin after that notice hit his email. I imagine him opening the letter, expecting another scolding, and finding out the state had opened an active file on his name. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about character, about crime, about who he chose to be when he thought no one would hold him accountable. And now? Now he might finally meet someone who does. He hasn't been arrested. Not yet. But Helen says the task force doesn't bother opening unless they're serious. And I know something Derek still hasn't learned. Time always sides with the patient. And I've got nothing but time. Was Melissa brainwashed by love, or did she know exactly what she was doing? Let's talk about it in the comments.